Today's daf we're going to be learning is Sotah daf kaf aleph, a very interesting one. We're going to continue on with women's issues, as we saw before. And I will already recommend at the beginning of class that it is a must, an absolute must for everyone after class. It's not on our site yet, but later this morning it will be. There's a gefet about women and learning Torah and a real thorough analysis of all the different opinions. This is why we have extra material, things that we don't have time to go through during daf class. You'll have time to listen after, or make time to listen. Rabbanit Shimoni from Yeshivat Drisha went through an excellent, all the different opinions and how we got to today, where, it went from maybe being not so recommended, at least not by everybody, for women to learn, why it's specifically recommended for women to learn, and real excellent analysis of all the different opinions and how things develop. So a definite must. Okay, with that, we're going to start. There's a study guide for today that'll help in terms of the structure. It's not that complicated. I'm not going to share screen, but it does always help. Okay, we're now at a question. We're talking about this woman. The woman is a Sotah, and she's supposed to go to the temple and drink this water, and she drinks the water, and then she doesn't die right away. But we learned that it could be she doesn't die right away, not because she's innocent, but because if she has any merits, then those merits basically will give her another year, 2 years, or 3 years, to which we said, wait a minute, where'd you get 2 years, 3 years? The three opinions we know are 3 months, 9 months, which we discussed yesterday, and 12 months. So we're going to start with the 12 month and understand where Rabbi Yishmael gets 12 months. But I'm now looking at the bottom of Kaf Amud, even though there's no clear proof about it, there is an allusion to it in the Tanakh. Dichtiv, in Sefer Daniel, it says, Daniel tells Nebuchadnezzar, Lahen malka, malki yishbar alayich, v'chatayich b'tzedakah prog, v'avayatach b'mechan anyan. He says, look, if you want, first he tells him you're going to be destroyed. And then he says, but if you want to live longer, you want it to be better for you, I'll tell you what you should do. You can redeem, that's prok is to redeem, your chatayich, your sins, b'tzedakah, by giving tzedakah. Which Rashi explains as your sins will be pardoned by the poor people, meaning God will pardon you, but on account of what you did for the poor people. And then you will have more time to live. Uchtiv, and then it says, Kilo mata al Nebuchadnezzar malka, uchtiv l'ktzat yarchin treasar. And then it said that basically the destruction came on Nebuchadnezzar when? 12 months later. So what do you see? He took Daniel's advice, gave charity, and he got another 12 months. So here you see this issue of 12 months being able to extend somebody's life. You could extend their life for 12 months. So, but none of these opinions matches 2 years or 3 years. To which they answer, La'olam Rabbi Yishmael. No, we're going to actually say it's Rabbi Yishmael. Ve'eshka kra de'amar v'tani. But we remember the Mishna said a year or 2 or 3. So we take that year and then we say, oh, but it could be repeated. You could repeatedly have years. How does this work? Dichtiv Kama Hashem, in famous psukim from Sefer Amos. Who knows anything about Amos, you know that this is the way Amos starts off with all these different nations. And it says, Kama Hashem al shlosha pish'ei Edom. The continuation is Arba'a lo ashivenu. There's 3 sins of Edom, which I can forego. But the 4th, no. And once it gets to 4, there's a point of no return. So what do you see here? For 3, God could potentially ignore it, right? And not take out his anger yet. So what do you see? You could have a year or 2 or 3, because there's this reference to the 3 years. And that's how we end up explaining our Mishna. But before we move on, we have one more question, which is, if you looked in Rabbi Yishmael, he said, I don't have a clear proof, but there's a reference to this 12 months, to which the Gemara asked, what do you mean you don't have a clear proof? What do you mean? It's a clear proof. His 12 months, right? He gave him 12 months to live. So they say, well, God isn't always as exacting with Gentiles as he is with Jews. This is always when they talk about in Jewish philosophy, right? It's one of these concepts that God is more exacting with the tzaddikim, with the righteous people that are closer to him, and he's more exacting with the Jewish people as opposed to the non-Jewish people. So it says here, we can't necessarily take note for how God pardoned and gave him extra time and think that it will necessarily apply to Jews, because maybe God's more exacting with us and doesn't give us that opportunity. So that's why it's only an illusion and it's not a clear reference. Now, moving on. So now we want to know what merits does this woman have? What kind of merits does she need in order to allow her to live longer? If you say it's the zchuyot of learning Torah, definitely can't be that. Why can't it be that? Because she's not commanded. So if she's not commanded, then basically she can't. Now, this is a strange thing. What do you mean? So what if she's not commanded? We know that even though you're not mitzvah v'oseh, gadola mitzvah v'oseh mi mishe'eno mitzvah v'oseh, which means the one who's commanded gets more reward, but they still do get reward. So it's a little bit strange, and in fact, it's even more strange. And in the Rambam actually lists, when he talks about women and learning, and he says they do get rewarded for learning Torah, even though they get less reward than men, but they do get rewarded. So it's a little bit strange, but maybe they think that it's not enough reward for the zchut to basically, to push off her death. Anyway, they reject that. Okay, can't be Torah. And the zchut mitzvah must be the zchut of mitzvot. Okay, we know there's reward for learning Torah, there's reward for mitzvah, it must be the reward of doing mitzvah. To which the Gemara says, really? Zchut mitzvah, mi megane kulehai. Does the zchut of a mitzvah, does it really protect you as much to be able to push off her punishment? V'hatanya. Now we're going to quote a very long braita, and the structure is going to be like this. We're trying to find an answer to our question. In the end, we're going to explain that it's zchut of a mitzvah, and we're going to work out this problem with the braita in two different ways. Then we're going to go back and re-suggest that it's the zchut of Torah, and somehow explain it in a particular manner. And then, which you might not be so happy with, and then we're going to go back to certain statements in this braita that aren't so clear. Okay, so it's a very long braita. I just want to remind you what the structure is so that you follow as we go. So here comes the braita that's going to basically say how can mitzvah protect her from death after drinking the Sotah waters. V'hatanya, et zot darash Rabbi Menachem bar Yossi. So the braita says this is what Rabbi Menachem bar Yossi darshan. Hiner mitzvah v'Torah or, a very famous pasuk. The Torah is like light, or I should really start with the mitzvah. Mitzvah is like a candle, and Torah is like light. Now, what does this mean? Okay, so metaphorically, a mitzvah is like a candle. That's a Torah be'or, and Torah is like the light. Et mitzvah b'ner. Now, they don't mean a light that you switch on. Light, they mean by sunlight. So et mitzvah b'ner lomar lecha ma neel enam gina el lefi sha'ah. They want to tell you that a mitzvah is like a candle. A candle, while it's lit, it provides light, but as soon as it burns out, there's nothing to it. So likewise, a mitzvah will provide temporary protection, but not very much, which is why they're then going to say, can't make sense that it's a mitzvah that protects this woman, because look, mitzvah provides protection only temporarily, and that won't be able to help this woman who's, basically, it sounds like while the candle's lit, maybe while you're doing the mitzvah, but once you're done with the mitzvah, obviously right now when she's in the Sotah ceremony, she's not involved in a mitzvah. So how could she be protected? So we're continuing in this metaphor. Now light is constant. It's true you don't see it at nighttime, but it comes back the next day, and the light is something that's constant. It doesn't go out. So ma'or megein la'olam, av Torah megeina la'olam. So likewise, if you learn Torah, it protects you forever. Ve'omer, and furthermore, to strengthen this idea about Torah, and you're about to see a pasuk that we read, and now you're going to understand why we read this every time we make a siyum. B'talechecha tanche otach. As you walk in it, it will protect you. B'shochbecha tishmor alecha. When you sleep, I'm just reading you the whole pasuk first, and then we'll darshan each part. When you sleep, tishmor alecha, it will protect you. V'kitzota itisichecha. And at the end, it will be your conversation. So now they're going to darshan. So this is all about learning Torah. Just talking about the greatness of learning Torah, which is why we say it at a siyum. That's as you're walking in it, that's in this world. When you lie down, that means when you die. Zomita. In death, it will also protect you. At the end of time, which is lati lavo, when the world to come, it will also be there. In other words, all the Torah you did in your life will continually protect you even when you're no longer alive. Mashala Adam, now they bring a parable. Okay, again, we're still in this bright. Mashala Adam shamalech bishon laila v'afela. He's walking in the night, in the dark. He has three fears. The first is kotzim, pchatim, ubarkanim. Those are thorns, pits, and thistles. Number two, he's worried about wild animals that come out at night and robbers that are out at night. And the third thing is he's lost and he has no idea which way he's supposed to go. So if the first thing that comes to him is a torch, right, like a light, the first fear is gone because now he can see where he's stepping and he won't step on thorns or knock into thistles or fall in a pit. But it won't protect him if a robber comes, or won't protect him from wild animals that are out at night. And it certainly doesn't help him find his way. Yeah, I mean, in other words, remember, this is someone not that he can't see the signs because it's dark. It's that he has no idea where he is. He got totally lost. He doesn't have ways, right? He doesn't have a way to help him get out of it. So the light, right, the torch, which is like the candle, is the mitzvah. The mitzvah partially helps him. The next thing is alamud hashachar. The light comes up. The sunrise starts to rise. Already, now he's already, right, he can see from, his torch, and now he has the light, which protects him even more. They don't come out anymore once it's light out. That's not when they pray. But he still doesn't know. Now here they're adding a third element. Until now, we thought the Torah protects everything. But now we're saying there's still one thing that's remaining, which is he still doesn't know where he's going. But when he gets to an intersection, right, and maybe there's some street signs that tell him this way, that, and this way, that, and then he knows exactly where he's going, then it's clear at this crossroads that he's in the right way. Okay, we're going to put aside this thing about the crossroads and what's the parable here, what's the takeaway. We're going to put that aside. Later, the Gemara is going to get to it, as I told you. The structure of this Gemara is we're almost done with the Breita. We have one more line of the Breita. Once we got into the Breita, we're in the Breita, and we're going to learn everything in the Breita, but then we're going to go back to why we brought the Breita. And then only when we're done with that are we going to go back and understand parts of this Breita, including that line and including the next line. Davar acher. A different way of darshaning this pasuk, mitzvah v'torah, or is to say, avera mechaba mitzvah ve'en avera mechaba Torah. If you sin and you have a mitzvah right under your belt, well, that will just kind of extinguish that mitzvah. But it won't extinguish Torah learning. Shene'amar, where do we get this from? A pasuk in Shir HaShirim, Mayim rabim lo yochlu lechabot et ha'ava. No matter how much water, as much water as you have, it can't put out the love. And what is the love? Learning Torah is considered love. And that's what they say. And this is very interesting because this totally contradicts something we saw in the beginning of the Masechet, okay, which is okay because there's different approaches. This basically says if you learn Torah and you sin, the sin will not take away the merits of the fact that you've learned Torah. You might remember in the beginning, I think it was on Daf Daled, we said, it was at the end of a Daf there, we said, don't think, right? You could have been someone like gotten the Torah like Moshe Rabbeinu. It doesn't matter if you sin in arayot, and you have some sexual impropriety, something like that. You're done. You're finished, right? You're going to get punished. Okay, so this says the opposite. So you see the different approaches to does it protect you or does it not protect you? Now getting back to our question. Again, we'll get back to that line in a few minutes. Amar Rabbi Yosef. So now we have to explain what is the zchut that helps her, because if it's the mitzvah we said is fleeting. It's like a candle. So Amar Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef's now going to say, and I charted this out, we're going to have two different approaches here to what's the difference between Torah and mitzvah. And in the end, both of them are going to say that mitzvah still protects you. It's just maybe a little limited in some other way. Okay, it's not the same as Torah. Each one is going to explain it a little bit differently. And we're going to distinguish between mitzvah and Torah and what you gain from it. We're going to distinguish between while you're involved in it And afterwards, when you're no longer involved in it, in other words, right, the after effects, does it have longer term effects? And we're going to deal with two issues. One is to protect, lahagen, and that's to protect from punishment. And the other is lahatzil, which is to save you. Now, the way the commentaries explain to save you is to save you from doing other sins. That certain things protect you from doing more sins, okay, from sinning. So here there's a bunch of permutations and combinations, and you'll see it in a minute. So Rabbi Yosef says, mitzvah. When it comes to mitzvah, while you're involved in the mitzvah, it protects and matzlah. It also saves you from doing other sins. If you're not doing the mitzvah, meaning you did it already and now you're not doing it anymore, which would be our Sotah woman, who might have mitzvot she did already, agune magna, it still protects you. So here you have it. The mitzvah is what protects her from dying. But atzule lo matzlah, but it won't prevent her from sinning in the future. Okay, that much it doesn't have. Torah, whereas Torah has one up on the mitzvah. What is that? Well, magna umatzlah. Both are true. It protects, and it also protects you from punishment, and it also saves you from future sinning, both in the time when you're doing it and even after the time. Matkifla Rabba. Rabba says, what are you talking about? And he's going to basically bring a proof from a situation that happened. Doeg va'achitofel milo aske b'torah. So first of all, Doeg and Achitofel, let's talk about who they were. Doeg Adomi and Achitofel was a Yoetz, one of the advisors of David, who eventually turns on him and goes to Absalom's side when Absalom rebels. And that's what they're referring to here. Doeg Adomi also was a friend of David's. I think he was one of his warriors, if I'm not mistaken. But in any case, he also turns on David. If you remember, David hides in the city of Nov, the Kohen city. And then Doeg tells Shaul, and then they end up killing all the inhabitants of the city. So both of them turn. Okay, it could be he was an advisor, maybe, not a warrior. Anyway, Doeg and Achitofel were both on David's side, and then both turn on him. So now they say, if you learn Sanhedrin, in Sanhedrin it says that Doeg and Achitofel learned Torah. So that's how we know they learned Torah. So they were Torah scholars, again, whatever Torah scholars were, right? And Achitofel is known to be David's rabbi also. Anyway, they were Torah scholars. And Amai lo higen alai. So why didn't, if we say that Torah protects you, what did it protect you from? From getting punished and from sinning. Well, these two guys both clearly sinned. So it didn't protect them at all. Ella Amar Rava. So Rava says it's clearly not true. What you said, Rabbi Yosef, we're going to explain it some other way. There's a debate whether the question was asked by Rava or Rava. Either which way, Rava now gives an alternative explanation. Torah b'idana da'asik be'magno matzah. So Torah clearly only protects you and saves you from sinning while you're in the moment. Yidana delo asikba, but if you're not dealing with it, this is just going to be a different level, but the same idea as the previous. If you're not learning Torah at the time, agune magna, it's like we said about the mitzvah last time. It protects you, but atzule lo matzah, but it won't save you from sinning. And that's how you explain Doeg and Achitofel, because they weren't learning Torah at the time. And mitzvah is going to have to go down a level, right? It's going to be less than the Torah. It's going to be the same whether you're in the middle of the mitzvah or whether you're not in the middle of the mitzvah. Agune magna atzule lo matzah. It protects you, but it doesn't save you from sinning ever. Mitzvot don't save you from sinning. Only learning Torah saves you from sinning. Mitzvot don't save you from sinning. So now we're going to basically assume that what it means is that now go back to our issue. So the mitzvah does protect you, though, from getting punished. So that's why the woman will get her punishment, right? Remember, it doesn't mean you won't get punished at all. It just pushes off your punishment. Okay, I see you're asking about freedom of choice, right? And how this connects. So first of all, you could say that this, what does it mean? And think about it. If you're involved in a mitzvah, or if you learn Torah, you can imagine that would protect you from sinning. It's kind of saying, and maybe this is a good reason why women should learn, right? It keeps you in the right frame of mind. It teaches you what's right and wrong. It's not a clear 100% this is going to work. Okay, you still could have free choice. Obviously, the question of Doeg and Achitofel questions that a little bit and shakes that up because it's saying they didn't have free choice, But I think what it was saying is, why didn't the Torah protect them from why didn't it save them from having these, going against David? Okay, so again, it doesn't have to be understood as this is 100%, but the question is saying they should have been in the right, because they learned Torah, according to what we said, it should have been able to prevent them from turning to the dark side, as we say. Okay. Ravina Amar. So now all that was two different explanations of the mitzvah is in there, the Torah is all, and yet it still could protect the woman from getting punished, because according to both of them, it does protect from punishment. Now we have a different answer. We're going to go back to the Torah answer, which I warned you about. Ravina Amar, so make sure you remember that I did warn you. Ravina Amar Lo'olam Zchut Torah. It is the zchut of the woman of learning Torah. But to Kamarte, no mitzvah said, but you said, but what do you mean? She's not commanded. Well, even though she's not commanded. Don't they get rewarded for allowing their sons to learn and for letting their husbands go and not come home? Isn't that, and don't, now it's a fascinating line. Look at the words. You have to understand the words here, right? They wait for their husbands till they come for the Beit Midrash, which, by the way, can mean two things. It could mean they let their husbands go away for 12 years, like Rachel and the daughter of Kabbalah Savua and Rabbi Akiva. Or it could mean they wait up at night till their husbands come home at night, right? They wait for them. They don't go to sleep before their husbands come home, right? They allow them to go out at night when women are busy with the kids and with the dinner and with everything else. Milo palgan bahadayu. This is a very interesting line. Not that they get reward, it's that they share the rewards that the husband gets. It's a fascinating line. It means he learns, right? There's X amount of reward for the husband's Torah learning. Let's say you have 100. Now, basically, he's going to split it with her. What all his rewards, what it basically means is, right, behind every great man is a great woman, right? You can say the opposite also, but right. The idea here is that basically she gets his share with him. It's not like she gets a reward. She gets his share. They share it. And this, by the way, is going to be similar to something we're going to see further on in a few minutes about exactly, you said it right, Adam, about the Yisachar Zvulun partnership. That also, you see this not just with men and women, but people who enable others to learn Torah, whether it's they support them financially, they also get rewarded and share the reward. It's the same idea, okay? So it's actually, there's something very beautiful about it, even though it rubs us the wrong way in terms of what? They can't get their own reward for their own learning. It's only that they're enablers. That seems unfair. Again, try to remember their life and what their lifestyle was like, and the women weren't learning. So here's a way of getting the women involved, yes, in getting the reward. Okay. Again, the Gemara does seem to indicate that women aren't getting reward if they learn Torah on their own, but the Rambam clearly doesn't think that's the case, and clearly says, even though the Rambam, the women in his day were really not going out so much and weren't learning very much, and he does say women are datan kalot, and they're light of head, and they're not really intellectually minded, and Torah is really not for them. But he does say if they learn, they get rewarded. So it's not that they don't get rewarded. I think that the gist of the sugya is the reward that they would need to protect them from dying from the Sotah isn't strong enough, okay? That they would get on their own. Possibly you could read it that way. Okay, we'll get back to this issue about the women and the learning in a little bit. So we're done with this sugya for now. We basically brought this Breita in to try to say that mitzvot can't really protect. In the end, we say they could. They could protect this woman. It's basically, we're going to assume it's mitzvot, or it's the Torah reward they get for allowing their husbands to go learn, or their children, their sons. Now we still have to deal with a few things, which is the Breita at the end said a few things that weren't so clear. My parashat Drachim, in that parable, it added a third element. We were really talking about two, mitzvah and Torah. Then it added this third element of the crossroads. So what is that? We're going to have three explanations. Amrav Chisda, Zeh Talmid Chacham v'yom mitah. It's a Talmid Chacham on the day of his death. What's the crossroads? When you're about to die. Why? Well, you could be a Talmid Chacham and learn and be great, but we never really know where you're going. You could turn one day, right? You could wake up one morning and decide, I'm throwing this all away. And therefore, that's why we still don't know what path you're on until the day of your death. Only at the day of your death will we know that you're on a certain path, because at this point, it's kind of too late to sin. Next option. You could learn, but you could not fear sin. So you could learn, right? Learning isn't everything. You could learn and be a sinner. So until you have that idea, that concept of yirat chet, of fearing of sin, we still don't know where you're going. Once you acquire that fear of sin, then we know you're in the right way. Third option, this is a Talmid Chacham that they paskin like him. What does that mean? That means that you can learn, but you could make mistakes, or there's different opinions. But if they decide to choose the halacha in your way, then you've arrived. That's when you're clearly going in the right way. Because you could be learning, and you're learning, you could be mistaken in what you're thinking. You could kind of veer off because you're not right, or maybe just we don't hold that way. So the real way of knowing we're going in your ways when they start paskening halacha like you. Davar acher. Now we have to get to the second explanation of the pasuk. Near mitzvah b'Torah, or first we talked about this parable and how it protects and all that, and then we said also you could explain it as the avera extinguishes a mitzvah but not Torah learning. I'm Rabbi Yosef. So now we're just going to hear another thing that was said about this. Rabbi Yosef says, Darshe Rabbi Menachem bar Yossi l'hai krak Sinai. He explained this pasuk like Sinai, like he got it at Sinai. If you remember, he was the one who was appearing in the Braita. Now he goes back to Doeg and Achitofel. If they had darshaned it that way, lo redafu batar David, they never would have turned on David. Because what made them turn on David? Dichtiv, lemor Elohim azavo. This is a parak of Tehillim where it talks about the enemies of David. What did they say? They said God left him. Why did they assume God left him? Because of the sin of Bathsheba, because he did erva, right? And that was it. But it wasn't really true, right? My darish, below your ebachar vatchet, right? Vatavar says, right? They darshaned and they said, look, it says shouldn't be involved in erva, right? In sexual impropriety. But they didn't know. They knew David had mitzvot and they knew he learned Torah, but they didn't realize that the avera doesn't extinguish the Torah that he learned, and that the Torah was going to protect him to enable him to continue to succeed. So they basically turned to the other side against him because they said, clearly he's heading for his downfall, right? It's like rooting for the winning team, right? As soon as they start losing, oh, clearly he's going to lose. But had they known this rasha, they never would have done that because they would have realized that his Torah learning was going to protect him. My boz yavuzulo. Now we have one last thing to deal with, which is Mayim rabim lo yuchlu lechabot et ahava. Okay, we had this pasuk in Shir Hashirim that Mayim rabim can't extinguish the love, which is exactly how we just defined it, right? That once you learn Torah, basically, no matter how much you sin, you still will be protected by the Torah you learned. Again, as I said, there's a totally different approach to this, which we saw in the beginning of the Masechet. Okay, this is not the only approach. And then it says, okay, same idea. But then it all of a sudden switches and it says, but if you put all your money into love, boz yavuzulo, they're going to go and take your money from you. So like looters. So now the Gemara wants to understand my boz yavuzulo. What is this talking about? Amar Ula, lo k'Shimon achi Azariah, v'lo k'Rabbi Yochanan de Ben Azai, not like the two of them. Okay, and now we're going to go back to this idea of people supporting people for Torah. The two of them were in this deal with other people about you learn and I'll support you. And that was good. But they did it, but did it in the wrong way. How so? When Rav Dimi came from Israel, he explained to us, they were brothers. So Hillel went to learn. He's apparently very poor and struggled. Shevna, his brother, went to work, made a lot of money. Lisself, only later, after Hillel already had learned, and it was Moser Nafsho, as they say, he gave his life to learn, he was very poor and struggled, came Shevna and said, Amarle, Tana arov v'liflo. Why don't we go together and split? Okay, so why don't we, now that you've learned, I'll take half your learning and I'll give you some money to live. Right, I'll take your reward that you got. And basically comes this heavenly voice with this, reciting this pasuk from Mishlei saying, from Shir Hashirim, saying, you can give all your money, but they're going to take your money away. Why? Because, so it seems, what's the problem here? First of all, he came after. Some people say it's because he had already learned. You can't get reward for Torah, for supporting someone after they learned the Torah. You can't get the reward of the Torah they learned previously. You can only do it if you do it in the beginning. And why is that? Because Hillel struggled all these years. And then Shevna comes later and says here, like, what about, he struggled through it on his own. He didn't have any help then. Nobody was supporting him. So, or his brother wasn't supporting him, right? His brother can't come at the end and say, oh, I want to get half your reward. So that's what that pasuk is referring to. Okay, back to our topic. So that was just all an aside to try to understand those last three things. And now we're going back to the Mishna. Omer Ben Azai. Okay, remember that's so that she knows that the schut tolala. Okay, so if you listen to Gefet, so she quotes in the Tosfot quotes some other opinions from the Yerushalmi, which we said at the time that Ben Azai was coming from a negative perspective, right? And he basically says, this is, so that if she's a Sotah, she'll know that, and she has some merits and she doesn't die right away, she won't start to say, oh, the Sotah water is, silliness. But in the Yerushalmi, Dafka, they quote from Hakel, that's the very famous, you bring the women to learn, right? And why do they learn? Nashim ba'alumot, nashim lishmoa, but lishmoa, why lishmoa? So that they can do mitzvot, and they need to learn in order to know how to do mitzvot. So all of a sudden you get a more positive spin on this opinion. It's a different opinion from someone else, but it should be also there. Okay, there's also that. Tov. Anyway, the Yerushalmi quotes some other things too. Like I said, listen together. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, kol melamed b'tot Torah melamdat tiflut. So now the Gemara says tiflut sakadatach. What do you mean limdat tiflut? What you're calling Torah tiflut again? Whether you mean it means something about sexual impropriety or it means nothingness, you can't call the Torah tiflut. And la'ema ki. What it means is it's as if he's teaching her tiflut. And what does this mean? We're going to see it in a minute. Amar Rabbi Yavau, my time of Rabbi Eliezer. He says, what's the reason for Rabbi Eliezer? Rabbi Yavau wants to know. He says, dichtiv, like he asked the question but answers it. Ani chochma shachanti orma. This is a problematic pasuk. It's a pasuk in Mishna. It says, I am wisdom, and shachanti, I dwell orma. Okay, now orma often means secret, okay, which usually used in a negative way. That's a little bit strange. Why? Because Mishlei all the time is talking about how chokhmah is the end all be all of the world, and kislut, foolishness, is the opposite. This pasuk seems to talk about the dangers of chokhmah and how it could cause orma, and that's what we're going to read right now. How does he understand this pasuk? Kevan shenechnesa chokhmah ba'adam, nechnesa imo armimut. As soon as you get wisdom, you become very cunning, okay? And now you become, right? You can figure out all sorts of ways to change things, mess things up. This seems like an intentional, not like nashim datan kalot, they don't understand things and they're going to misunderstand, but that they're going to purposely do it, it sounds like almost. Obviously, the question is, why is this only women and not men? So first of all, wait till the end of the daf and you're going to see that there are men that they're concerned are going to also misconstrue when they learn. So it's not only women, it just happens to be also women. And women, we're in this category, right? That we're going to see other categories of people that also might misconstrue the Torah. But women are one of those categories, again, because they usually learn. Sometimes are seen as, cunning in their mind. Why it should be, again, is tricky. Not clear why they think that. But again, you saw earlier, and I think this goes back to that statement from Rabbi Yehoshua that he was worried that the women, we're actually going to get to it more here. Sorry, it's later. But about the woman who wants kavet tiflut mitisha kavinu prishut. So we're going to talk about that soon. Fine, I'll wait with that. Okay, so now what we have to understand is if that's what that pasuk means, so what does Ben Azai say? He doesn't seem to be worried about that. Rabbanan, how does he read that pasuk? Okay, they say Rabbanan, which means the rabbis. What it really means is those who disagree with Rabbi Eliezer, which is Ben Azai. We take something someone else said and said he must hold by Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina the way he darshan that pasuk. Damar Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina. Ein divrei Torah mitkaymin ela b'misha ma'amid atzmo arom elehem. He's going to take this in a positive way. Orma comes from naked, and naked in a very positive way. Why? What is it saying? When will you have chokhmah? Ani chokhmah. Why? Ki shachanti orma. Because I dwelled or I lived naked, meaning I didn't have anything else. Okay, I didn't work. I didn't make a living. All I did was learn Torah. That's how I was able to achieve my real understanding. That's how you do it. Okay, that means you make yourself naked on account of the Torah learning. And this would be, right, we've seen different sugyot about this. This would say better not to, right, better to learn and not to work. Obviously, we've seen sugyot that say it's important to work and learn, right? It's not good to only, right, we actually talked about it yesterday with Rabbi Meir, who was a great Talmud Chacham, If you read Shulim Mishkin's article, she points that out, and yet he worked. He was a scribe. He had a job. And even when Rabbi Yishmael, when he comes into the Beit Midrash, he says, what's your melacha? What do you work for? Right? Meaning, obviously, there's an assumption you're working. But this is saying maybe to achieve, the Rambam always splits people into the average person and then the unique, right? The one who's in a totally different madriga, a different realm entirely. And maybe those people need to be, like this. Okay. That's where he gets from. And in that same vein, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, ein divrei Torah mitkamin ela b'mi shemasim atzmo k'mi she'eino. Shneimar v'chochma me'ayin timatzeh. Another pasuk. Chochma comes me'ayin. It is found in nothing, a place where there's nothing. And that's where they learn the same idea. Rabbi Yochanan says it, someone who makes himself as if he's not in this world, right? Meaning, again, doesn't benefit from this world in any real physical manner. So now we're going to move on to Rabbi Yehoshua. Rabbi Yehoshua says, Rotze isha, if you remember, b'kav v'tiflut, mitish'a kabinu prishut. So the Gemara wants to know my kamar. What's he saying? And maybe how does this connect? Although they don't really say very much. You're going to see, they're going to quote it. You say, Haki kamar, this is what he meant to say. And all they're going to do is add one word. And it doesn't really make it so much clearer. Rotze isha b'kav v'tiflut imo. Well, maybe it is an important one because it's saying a woman would rather one kav and tiflut with him, with her husband. Maybe that is really the key here. It's not that she wants to sleep around with other men. That's not what we're talking about. A woman would rather her husband, and here we're going to see this in a very different vein, okay, than we saw it before. Mitish'a kabinu prishut. She'd rather, and what they really seem to be saying is she'd rather her husband come home early and bring home only one kav of food, but be with her, and be with her the way they define that is, right, have relations with her. But she'd rather that from him working much longer hours, making tish'a kabim, bringing 9 kav of food at home, and prishut, but never being there for her, because either he comes home too late, or he's working abroad, or he basically comes home and is too tired and just goes to bed. So what they're really talking about here, and they're saying the nature of a woman is, and this, I think one can agree that if the woman is, let's say, not working out of the home and is working in the home, which all the women were doing in those days, and dealing with the kids and dealing with the food and dealing with this, they'd much rather their husbands come home, right, and be there with them than be alone all day, and have no husband around. So he's using this as negative. Why? Because it's distracting the men from, number one, having, making a living, because they're always pulled by their wives to come home, and from learning Torah, obviously, because, right, this is saying the woman is pulling him away because she's always saying, come home to me, I want to have relations with you. Okay, right? I don't think it's really saying, because it's hard to say that they're saying, well, women have a much stronger sexual desire than men, because I don't think that's proven to be true necessarily, certainly not as a general rule. Like what, the men don't have a yetzer hara for this? They of course do, and that's talked about in many, many other sugyot. So again, I think it can be understood in this way of the woman being at home and kind of pulling him, we want you home. And this goes against, right, what we saw before about the women get rewarded. That's why I said we're going to come back to this idea for encouraging their husbands to not come home, right? And there's what to be said there, even though, again, a little bit rubs us the wrong way. That our role is only secondary, right? It's only not only secondary, but enabling learning Torah, whereas it's not allowing us to necessarily partake. But it's not necessarily saying that. But anyway, and then what's tricky here is what's the connection? And if you look at Rashi connects it to and he says, Lefichach in Tish'a kabinu prishut, in that Rashi, he says, Lefrosh min tiflut, Lefichach ein tov shetumod Torah. Therefore, it's not good that she learned Torah. I don't get the connection exactly and why Rashi connects it so obviously. But it seems that what they're saying is her mind is attuned toward having sex with her husband, and therefore her mind is not in the right place for learning Torah, possibly. Whether it has to connect or not is a good question. Rashi connects it to the previous, but it could be it's not connected because it's Rabbi Yehoshua, it's not Rabbi Eliezer, and it's coming to say possibly something else. Because Rabbi Eliezer mentioned tiflut, so he makes this tiflut. Okay. Interesting. You're saying maybe learning, Ruth is pointing out that learning maybe makes you less interested in intimacy, possibly. Okay, so now we basically have, but the problem is they're not really, that doesn't work because they're not really, one second, I want to see what you're saying. They're not really saying that, contrary to her nature. The Shanstein says the learning makes her less interested in intimacy, which is contrary to her nature. Okay, so it doesn't fit with her. It's not saying, because you would think that then she should do that, because that would channel her energy in the way that they want her to be, and not in the way, they don't want her all the time. Always, they're using this thing of tiflut in a negative way, I believe. So anyway, something to think about. Okay, hu haya omer, chasid shoteh. Now we're left with the next statement of Rabbi Yehoshua, or we're up to the next statement of Rabbi Yehoshua. Rabbi Yehoshua said, first he talked about this woman in the kav and tiflut rather than isha kabin and prishut. Because of the prishut, we're going to get to an isha prusha, where he's going to say that's also not so good. But we'll get to that. We're now on the first two terms he talks about. He says, these four characters, which we're going to talk about two of them today, are mivalei olam. They cause the world to be destroyed. So who are they? Chasid shoteh, okay, for all the comments, the discussions that we're struggled with today, this is one that we're going to be very happy with. Or at least for me, I identify with this. Chasid shoteh. What's a chasid shoteh? It's a very pious man who's totally foolish. What would be the case? There's a woman drowning in the water. And he says, if I go save her, I'll have to look at her. I don't want to look at a woman. That's not pious. And then he just lets her drown. Okay, that's obviously absurd, and he shouldn't be doing it. For this, we're going to have 7 answers. Rabbi Yochanan. So rasha arom literally means a naked, or maybe not naked, we probably more evil. A rasha who's surreptitious, sly, right? The armumit we saw before with the woman. So what would that be? Rabbi Yochanan. You're in court with someone else, and you go to court first, and you send your lawyer in advance to go talk to the judge about your case and see things only from your side first before even the other side is even there. That's giving yourself an unfair advantage. It's very sly. Rabbi Yehoshua, interesting. You're giving tzedakah. It's a little bit like the chasid shoteh, because it's like you're doing something good, but it's really doing something bad. Up to 200 zuz, we're going to talk about it right now. It says in the Mishna, you're going to give him that zuz that gets him to 200 zuz. You're basically over the property line, and then you can't get all of the gifts for the poor people. So if someone's just under the poverty line and you get them to you exactly right at the poverty line, and there they can't get any gifts anymore, that's not a good plan. If he had 1 dinar less, 1,000 people could give him 1 dinar at the same time, and he'd be able to accept it. So that's why if you give him 1 dinar, you're basically preventing him from getting all sorts of other money. Rabbi Asi Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, let's explain what this is. You're orphans, your father died. There's boys and girls left. If you remember, the boys get the inheritance. The girls, though, get fed food. But where do they get fed food from? They have access to things that were land, property related. So if they had not a lot of land, then it all goes to the girls and the boys get nothing really. So if someone tells them, well, if you want to have it all go to you, just sell it. And once you sell it, well, then it's all becomes money, and that is yours and not theirs. And so if someone gives them advice, this is what you should do, right? It might be true that that's right. And that's what we're going to see right now. They shouldn't do it, but if they did it, it's a valid sale. So if you give them advice, go do it. You're not supposed to really do it lechatchila, initially. But if someone gives them advice, that's a rasha. These are off. A lot of these are give advice. What kind of advice? Sell your property like Rabban Shimon Gamliel. We're going to see the case, what they're talking about. Ditanya. If I say I'm giving you my property when I die, but when you die, it's going to go to someone else, meaning it's not going to stay in your family. If you sold it and ate the proceeds, Rebbe says, the person that I promised to, the third person, they call it the second person, but it's the 2 people that I promised to. So the last one can go take it out from whoever you sold it to, because I promised it to them. But Rashba Gomel, the second guy only has what the first guy had left. So basically, if you sold it, they don't get anything. So if you give advice like Rabban Shimon Gamliel to sell it so that, right? You can get the proceeds and then enjoy them in your lifetime, and you don't have to pass it on to anyone after. So that's a rasha arom. Rabbi Yossi Bar Chama, 3 more left. Someone who convinces other people to go in his ways. This is someone who wants to make himself look great so that he can hide all the bad things he's doing. That's the way people seem to explain this. You make yourself a trendsetter, and people will all want to do what you're doing, but then secretly you can do other things, because once people view you in a public way as a good person, it's very hard to break that. Rabbi Zreik Amar, this is a very interesting one. You, for yourself, you're lenient, but you tell others to be very strict. That's inappropriate. That's a rasha arom. And ula amal, and here we're going to get back to something we talked about before. I promised this at the end. This is someone who learns. He reads the Torah. He reads the Mishnayot, but he doesn't really understand what he's doing because he doesn't learn with Talmidei Chachamim, and he misunderstands. Here we go to the same concern of the rabbis, that people misunderstand the Torah. It's not only women. And there's a concern that he will misunderstand the Torah if he doesn't do that. And with this topic, we'll continue a little bit more tomorrow. Okay, that's it for today. So quick review. We started with the idea of zchut Torah to 3 years. Who does that hold by? Then we had zchut Torah. What zchut? Is it Torah? Is it mitzvot? And if it's Torah, what kind of Torah? And then we went back to Ben Azai. What is this tiflut? The 2 ways they each understand that pasuk, one in a positive way, one in a negative way, that pasuk for Mishna about the chokhmah and the orma. Then we tried to explain Rabbi Yehoshua's 2 statements, one about the woman in the kav tiflut rather than 9 kavin and prishut. And then we went into the chasid shoteh. We have 1 explanation in the rasha arom. We had 7 explanations of what a rasha arom could be. And then we'll get to the other things that he says in tomorrow's daf. Wishing everybody a great day. And don't forget to listen to Gefet.